for the rights of women, she knew that she must address the causes and appetites that drove girls like the one in Groton, not to the apex, but into the abyss. This search for understanding led Fuller to wonder about the nature of authentic virtue. She was aware that much of what her society deemed virtuous for women had limited and demoralized them, instead of encouraging them toward a higher concept of themselves. The besetting question was this: was there any objective basis for an idea of feminine virtue, or were such notions merely a matter of perception, conditioned by social position and prejudice? Furthermore, even if those ideas of virtue lacked an authentic basis, did they retain value as a species of platonic noble lie, objectively untrue, but nevertheless necessary to preserving order in society? The search for the dividing line between truth and illusion led Fuller to places where no New England congressman's daughter was likely to have gone before. And if her visits to the deathbeds of sexual outlaws and the prison cells of prostitutes finally gave her no definite answers, they gave rise to some of the most fascinating reflections in which she ever engaged. Although the idea of feminine virtue ascribed certain positive qualities like gentleness, modesty, and maternal love to female identity, it also typically linked the moral downfall of woman to another concomitant of gender identity, namely sexual desire. Yet even if desire were written out of the equation, the very fact and perception of sexual difference potentially stood in a woman's way toward attaining a pure soul. According to Emerson, the proper culture of the soul could take place only when one realized that reality was spiritual instead of physical. If one wrongly supposed that divine truth depended on externalities, only a short time would pass before one's religiosity descended into medieval brutality. The base impulse, quote, to whip that naughty heretic, unquote, Emerson told his journal in 1838, quote, is the natural feeling in the mind whose religion is external, unquote. Yet Emerson wrote from within a culture that firmly associated externality with womanhood, both because perceptions of women were too often inseparable from female sexual characteristics, and because women themselves were generally assumed to be fixated upon outward appearances. Indeed, Emerson called the impulse to scourge the heretic a, quote, feminine vehemence, unquote. Quote, the life of women, he noted in his journal, was, quote, unfortunately so much for exhibition, unquote. Now, Emerson's experiences with women like Fuller, Elizabeth Peabody, and his own Aunt Mary eventually led him to expect just a little bit more out of femininity. Nevertheless, he could not wholly dispense with the idea that the excellence of a woman's character depended heavily on her worldly condition. He observed, quote, I have thought that the perfection of female character seldom existed in poverty, at least where poverty was reckoned low, unquote. The reason, he surmised, was that women typically lacked will, and that wealth could bolster the will as meaner circumstances could not. So you see, in Jacksonian America, a man, like Emerson or Bronson Alcott, could find ways of regarding and presenting himself as a sexless mind and spirit. For a woman, identified first and foremost with the corporeal and the materialistic, the positing of self as spirit was too often an invitation to skepticism and even ridicule.